A sub-zero wind slices through the Ruhr forest. 50 yards beyond the wire, a shadow shivers in the sleet. My frostbitten finger rests on the trigger, but the sound cutting the air is not a mortar shell. It is the rhythmic, high-pitched whimpering of a child. January 1945, Western Germany, the war's cruelest winter. This is the story of how I defied a death sentence protocol to save 17-year-old Gunter Hess and discovered that mercy could survive even when the world was frozen solid. Subscribe for more Untold Chronicles. My breath came out in thick white plumes that seemed to freeze before they even left my lips. The air in the Ruhr pocket didn't just feel cold, it felt heavy, like it was trying to crush the life right out of my lungs. I squeezed the grip of my rifle, feeling the bite of the cold metal through my wool gloves. Everything around me was a world of gray and silver, a landscape carved out of ice and iron. The pine trees were heavy with snow, their branches bowing down like mourners at a funeral. I had spent 3 years in this war, but I had never known a silence so absolute. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, a void where even the sound of my own heartbeat felt like a violation of the peace. I tried to think about the small comforts back at the command post to keep my mind from fracturing. I could still smell the faint, ghostly aroma of the real coffee we had brewed that morning. It was rich, dark, and full of the kind of warmth that promised you were still a human being. We had sugar too, real white sugar that tasted like a miracle on the tongue when you mixed it into the bitter brew. In the American lines, we lived like kings compared to the poor souls across the wire, but even all the supplies in the world couldn't stop the shivers that were currently rattling my bones. I adjusted my position in the foxhole, the frozen dirt crunching under my boots with a sound like breaking glass. That was when I heard it. It wasn't the crack of a sniper's rifle or the low rumble of a distant tiger tank. It was something much worse. It was a high-pitched, rhythmic sound that cut through the silence like a jagged blade, a whimper. It was soft at first, almost lost in the moan of the wind, but then it grew steady. It was the unmistakable sound of a child crying in the dark. I froze, my finger ghosting over the trigger of my weapon. In this part of the world, in this stage of the war, there shouldn't have been anything living between the lines except for rats and the dying. "Keep your head down, Kelly. Just keep your head down and stay frosty." I whispered the words to myself, hoping the sound of my own voice would drown out that terrible noise. But the whimper didn't stop. It wasn't a loop or a recording. It had the erratic, desperate quality of true pain. It sounded like a small animal trapped in a snare, or a boy who had finally realized he was never going home. I peered over the edge of the embankment, my eyes straining against the darkness. The moon was a sliver of ice in the sky, offering just enough light to turn the snow into a field of shimmering ghosts. Is there someone out there? Who is out there? Who is out there? I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get one. Just more of that rhythmic, soul-crushing sobbing. The whimpering was coming from about 30 yards out, near a cluster of jagged, blackened stumps that used to be a grove of oak trees. I saw a shape. It was a small, dark hump against the white expanse of the snow. It didn't look like a soldier. It looked like a pile of rags that had been tossed aside by a passing storm. I knew that shape belonged to someone like Gunter Hess, though I didn't have a name for him yet. All I knew was that something was dying in front of me, and the protocol said I had to let it happen. The standing orders from the brass were as clear as the ice on the river. We were to ignore all movement in no man's land until daybreak. No lights, no patrols, no exceptions. If something moved in the dark, you either shot it or you let the winter take it. There was no third option in the middle of a winter offensive. You are going to stay right here, Sergeant. You are going to do your job and wait for the sun. I told myself that, but my hand was already reaching for the flashlight on my belt. The sound out there was changing. It was turning into a series of short, sharp gasps. The shape in the snow moved slightly, a hand reaching out and clawing at the frozen earth. It was a small hand, pale as a bone. I could see the skin even from this distance. It looked like a marble statue coming to life in the middle of a graveyard. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that matched the rhythm of the child's cries. I thought about the K-rations in my pack, specifically the chocolate bars. They were hard as bricks in this weather, but they were sweet. They represented a world where people still cared about things like treats and kindness. I looked back at the shadows of my own men, sleeping in their holes, unaware that their sergeant was about to step into the abyss for a sound that shouldn't exist. God help me, I can't just sit here. The whimpering grew louder, a high, thin reed of a voice gasping for air. It felt like an apparition, a ghost that had wandered out of the ruins of a burned-out village to haunt us for what we had done to this land. I knew that if I stayed in this hole, that sound would follow me for the rest of my life. It would be there every time I closed my eyes, a reminder that I chose a protocol over a person. I took a deep breath of the freezing air, feeling it burn my throat, and prepared to break every rule in the book. I looked at the dark shape of Gunter Hess in the distance, and realized that the war wasn't just about killing anymore. It was about who we would be when the shooting finally stopped. The wind kicked up again, carrying the scent of pine and something far more out of place in this frozen wasteland. It was the faint, lingering smell of real coffee from our own lines. Back at the command post, only 200 yards behind me, there were crates of the stuff. There were sacks of white sugar and the heavy, rich scent of gasoline from the idling engines of our trucks. We were a tidal wave of steel and calories, pushing against a wall of starving shadows. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the crinkle of a Hershey bar wrapper. It was a small thing, but in the middle of this frozen hell, it felt like a bar of solid gold. I thought about the taste of it, the way the sugar would hit my tongue and make my heart race, and then I heard that sound again. It was a soft, wet sob that broke through the roar of the wind. I stared into the blackness, my eyes straining to make sense of the geometry of the trees. I remember the briefing from 3 days ago. The orders were etched into my brain like a scar. Do not engage any unidentified movement in the neutral zone after nightfall. Do not leave the perimeter for any reason. In this part of the forest, the Germans were known to use decoys. They would send out a wounded man to draw us into the sights of a sniper, or worse, use a child to lure a soft-hearted soldier into a minefield. The brass called it tactical caution. I called it a death sentence for anyone caught in the middle. I looked out at the jagged line of the concertina wire, the barbs frosted white like the teeth of a ghost. I knew that if I stayed in this hole, the person out there would be a corpse by dawn. The temperature was dropping below zero, and the human body can only fight the ice for so long before the blood just stops moving. Just stay down, I whispered to the empty air, my voice cracking from the cold. I felt the grit of the frozen dirt against my cheek as I leaned closer to the edge of the foxhole. If you move, the boys on the left flank will open up with the heavy machine guns. If you stay still, the frost will take you. You are dead either way, aren't you? I was talking to a ghost, but the ghost answered with another high-pitched whimper. It was a sound that didn't care about standing orders or the grand strategy of 1945. It was the sound of a child who wanted his mother. Out there in the dark, near that clump of frozen brush, sat a shape that didn't belong to the war. It was Gunter Hess. I did not know his name then, but I could see the curve of a helmet that was too large for the head beneath it. I could see the way the figure slumped, defeated by the simple weight of the atmosphere. "Why are you still crying, Gunter Hess?" I asked the shadows. "Do you think there is someone out here who can help you? Do you think the uniform I wear makes me a savior or a monster?" I could smell the gun oil on my rifle, a sharp metallic tang that usually brought me a sense of security. Tonight it smelled like a funeral. I thought about the abundance of our army again. We had the boots, we had the wool blankets, and we had the hot meals waiting for us at dawn. We had everything we needed to win the war. But I wondered if we had what we needed to keep our souls. If I let that boy die 30 yards away from my rifle, I would never be able to look at my own family again without seeing a frozen face. I would never be able to drink a cup of that rich, hot coffee without tasting the bitterness of my own cowardice. The protocol was a lie designed to keep us safe, but it was a safety that felt like a cage. "You are a fool, Kieran," I muttered to myself. "A damn fool who is going to get shot by his own men." I checked the safety on my rifle once more, the click sounding like a cannon shot in the absolute silence of the woods. I knew what I had to do, and I knew the cost. If the officers caught me, it was a court-martial. If the Germans saw me, it was a bullet through the head. But as I looked at that dark shape in the distance, I realized that some rules were meant to be broken so that the man following them could live with himself. I gripped the edge of the embankment, my gloves slick with frost, and prepared to step into the mouth of the dark. I took one last look at the safe, familiar dirt of my foxhole, and then I hauled myself up. "Wait for me," I breathed, though the wind swallowed the words before they could reach the boy. "I am coming out there, Gunter Hess. Don't you dare die before I get there." The frozen mud felt like iron teeth biting into my palms as I scrambled over the lip of the embankment. I expected a bullet to find me the moment my head cleared the dirt. I expected the sky to light up with flares, turning the world into a stark white nightmare of magnesium and fire. But there was nothing but the wind. It moaned through the jagged remains of the pine trees, a low and mournful sound that seemed to mock the very idea of a war. I took 10 steps, then 20. My thumb was white-knuckled on the safety of my rifle, and my eyes searched every shadow for a movement that was not the swaying of a dead branch. I felt like a ghost walking through a graveyard. My own breathing was too loud in my ears, a ragged, misty puff that vanished into the sub-zero air. I could hear the distant low rumble of our trucks idling 2 miles back at the supply depot. It was a mechanical heartbeat, a reminder of the massive engine of the American Army that sat waiting to crush whatever was left of this country. To me, that sound meant gasoline, the smell of fresh wool blankets, and the promise of a hot meal. I could still taste the lingering sweetness of the canned peaches I had eaten for dinner, a syrupy luxury that felt like it belonged to another planet. Out here in the neutral zone, the air tasted of nothing but ice and the metallic tang of old shell fragments. I reached the 30-yard mark and stopped. My knees were shaking, not just from the cold, but from the pure, unadulterated terror of being alone in the dark. I pulled the heavy brass flashlight from my belt. My fingers were so numb I could barely feel the switch, but I pushed it forward. The beam cut through the dark like a blade, slicing the mist in half. "Don't move. Put your hands where I can see them. Right now."
"Please, we are here. We are not fighting you."
I said, "Stay still. I have a rifle on you. Do you understand? One wrong move and I will open up."
"Yes, we understand. No guns. We have no guns left to hold."
"Where are the rest of you? How many are in this hole? If there is a machine gun team nearby, you better tell me before my squad starts throwing mortars."
"Only 3. We are just 3. My friends, they cannot stand up. They are too cold to move."
I swept the light across the mud, and that is when the beam hit him. He was huddled in a shallow crater, his face so white it looked like carved bone. He looked like he was made of nothing but shadows and desperation. I could smell the rot of his wet uniform and the sharp, sour tang of long-term starvation. It was a smell I knew from the liberated villages, the scent of a body eating itself to stay alive. I reached into my field jacket and pulled out a small, wax-wrapped block of chocolate I had saved from my ration pack. The silver foil crinkled as I peeled a corner back, a sound that seemed impossibly loud and bright in the gloom of the forest. I held it out and the boy's eyes followed it with a terrifying intensity.
"Is that food? Is that real sugar?"
"It is chocolate. It is full of sugar and fat. It will stop the shaking for a minute. Just take it."
"I have not seen sugar in a year. My eyes do not believe what they are seeing. It smells like the shops in Berlin before the fires."
"Take it slowly. If you eat it too fast, your stomach will just reject it. I am not out here to watch you get sick. Cold."
"Thank you. Thank you, American. You have a smell of coffee and tobacco on you. It is the smell of a man who is not dying."
"Don't thank me yet, Gunter Hess. I am still deciding if I am taking you back to my lines or leaving you out here to the frost. Who else is with you?" I saw 2 other shapes in the light.
"My comrades. They are younger than me. They are tired. They have been eating the needles from the trees for 3 days."
I stepped closer, my boots sinking into the slush. The beam of my light shifted, revealing the 2 figures huddled behind the older boy. Their uniforms were twice as large as their frames, the heavy wool hanging off their narrow shoulders like theater costumes. The collars were stiff with frozen sweat and dirt. These were not the hardened grenadiers I had been briefed on. These were not the fanatical killers the sergeants back at camp warned us about. They looked like children who had been dragged out of a classroom and dressed in the scraps of a dying empire. I looked at the chocolate in the boy's shaking hand, and then back at the dark line of my own trenches. I was trespassing in a place where mercy was supposed to be dead, and the weight of what I was looking at felt heavier than my pack. Can they walk? If I bring you in, you have to move fast. My captain will be checking the line at 0400.
One can walk, the other, he is sleeping. I cannot wake him up.
He isn't sleeping, kid. He is freezing to death. Get him up. Now.
I try so hard, but he is so light, like he is made of paper.
I looked at the boy Gunter and saw the tears freezing on his cheeks. The abundance of my own world, the coffee, the cigarettes, the warm engines, felt like a sin in the face of this. I lowered my rifle and let it hang by the sling. The war was still happening all around us. But in that 30-yard circle of light, it was just 4 people trying to remember how to be human. I reached down and gathered the youngest boy into my arms. He was so light, it was terrifying. It felt like holding a bundle of dry sticks wrapped in a heavy, frozen coat. Gunter Hess stood beside me, his knees knocking together, watching me with eyes that were too large for his sunken face. I did not say anything. I could not. I just turned and started the long trek back toward our lines, through the jagged gap in the wire I had cut earlier. Each step through the deep snow felt like a mile, but the heat of the boy's desperation seemed to burn right through my wool jacket. As we approached the command post, the smells of the American army hit me like a physical blow. It was the scent of incredible, impossible abundance. I could smell the rich, heavy grease of the tank engines idling nearby, the thick blue smoke of gasoline that meant we had fuel to burn. Most of all, I smelled the coffee. It was real, bitter, and hot, a scent that belonged to a world of kitchens and breakfast tables. Not this frozen hell. Gunter Hess stopped for a second, his head tilted back, his nostrils flaring as he tried to pull that smell into his lungs. He looked like a man who had forgotten that the world could contain anything other than the smell of cordite and rot. I kicked the heavy wooden door of the command post open. The heat inside was a shock, making my skin sting and my eyes water. Standing in the center of the room, under the flickering light of a single lantern, was my commanding officer. He did not look like a savior. He looked like a man who had reached his breaking point. He had his Colt 45 drawn, the heavy steel barrel pointed directly at my chest. He told me to stop right where I was and asked me what in the hell I thought I was doing, bringing the enemy into his headquarters. "Put the gun away, sir," I said. I did not salute. I did not even stand up straight. I just looked at him over the top of the boy, slumped across my shoulders. These are children. They have been living on pine needles and melted snow for 2 weeks. They are not a threat to you or this platoon. They are just boys who want to see another morning. The officer was shaking with rage. He shouted about the standing orders and the court-martial that was waiting for me. He called me a traitor for bringing the enemy into our house, while our own men were dying in the foxholes. I looked around the room at our supplies. I saw the crates of canned peaches, the stacks of white bread, and the boxes of fresh ammunition. We had everything, and these boys had nothing. The disparity felt like a crime. "You can strip my stripes tomorrow," I told him, my voice low and steady. "You can put me in the stockade for the rest of the war. But right now you are going to get the medic, and he is going to help these boys before anyone else in this camp gets a hot meal. That is how this is going to go, sir." For a long, heart-stopping moment, the only sound was the crackle of the wood stove and the wet, rattling breath of the boys. The officer looked at Gunter Hess, who was staring at the floor, his hands tucked into his armpits to keep them from shaking. The officer's face softened, just an inch. He slowly lowered the pistol and slid it back into his holster. He did not say another word to me. He just turned to the doorway and barked for the medic to get in there immediately. The medic arrived a minute later, his boots thumping loudly on the floorboards. He saw the state of the youngest boy and immediately began tearing open bandages and pouring clean water. I watched Gunter Hess as the medic pulled a loaf of white bread from a ration box. To us, it was just bread. To Gunter Hess, it looked like gold. When the medic handed him a thick slice, the boy did not even bite it at first. He just pressed the soft white surface against his cheek, closing his eyes as if the feel of it was enough to save him. "Eat it, Gunter Hess," I whispered. I sat him down on a crate near the stove. The heat was making the damp wool of his uniform steam, filling the room with the scent of wet dog and old earth. I reached into my own pocket and pulled out a bar of chocolate. I had been carrying it since we crossed the border, waiting for a moment when I felt I truly earned it. I broke it in half and held it out. "Is this for me?" Gunter Hess asked. His voice was small and raspy, like dry paper rubbing together. "Yes," I said, "it is for you. Eat." He took a bite, and I watched his whole body jump as the sugar hit his system. He chewed slowly, tears finally breaking free and running through the grime on his face. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a confusion that was more painful than any wound. He asked why I was doing this. He said they were told we would kill them on sight. I did not have a grand speech about democracy or freedom. I just thought about how easy it was to be a soldier and how hard it was to be a man. I told him I helped because I did not want the war to be the only thing left of us when the shooting finally stopped. As the sun began to rise, turning the snow outside into a flat, blinding white, the boys finally fell asleep near the stove. The medic told me they would live. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, listening to the artillery start up again in the distance. The war was still there, waiting for us. But in that small, warm room, I felt like I had finally won a battle. Not for a hill or a town, but for the soul of the man I used to be before the world went mad. I didn't stay a soldier forever. By 1950, I was back home in Boston, teaching history to young men the same age Gunter had been. Every time I looked at my students, I didn't see soldiers or enemies. I saw lives that deserved a future. I never saw those boys again, but I later heard Gunter became a baker in Cologne, dedicated to ensuring no one in his city ever went hungry. In those frozen woods, I realized that hate is a choice, but hunger is a fact. Ideologies eventually die in the mud, but an act of mercy echoes long after the guns fall silent. That is why we remember. Subscribe for more stories of the humanity found in the dark. The characters, incidents, and dialogue in this video are dramatized for narrative and entertainment effect. While some events may be inspired by real-life themes, this story is a work of fiction.